Welcome, traveler, to another whispered tale beneath the stars. Tonight, we wander into the forgotten corners of Middle-earth, into the fading echoes of a world after war. If you find yourself carried away by the soft flow of this story, don't forget to gently tap the subscribe button and join us for many more journeys across the lands of shadow and light. Your presence here means more than you know. Now, close your eyes and listen closely. The sky was a sallow grey, stretched thin over the dead bones of Isengard, where once towers of smoke and fire had blotted out the sun itself. Now, the world was quiet, save for the creak of broken beams swaying in the wind and the soft crumble of ash beneath heavy boots. Maugruk trudged alone through the ruins, his heavy form weighed down not by armor nor weapon, but by something heavier still. The silence, the absence of command, the emptiness where once the voice of Saruman had thundered in his mind. The world around him smelled of damp stone and burnt timber, a ghost of battle lingering in every corner. But the war was over. He had heard it whispered among the scattered. Remnants, the dark tower fallen, the eye extinguished, the lords who had bred him dead or fled, leaving the likes of him to wander a world that no longer needed creatures of war. His hands, rough and scarred, hung loosely at his sides, fingers twitching sometimes out of habit, reaching for a blade that was no longer there. The marks of battle were still fresh across his skin, scabbed wounds, broken armor plates clinging to a battered leather tunic. But there would be no healers here, no masters to order his wounds tended. Only the hollow company of the crows that circled above, their cries thin and mocking. A breeze stirred the ashes, sending a cloud swirling around his legs like mist. And for a moment, Maugruk paused, staring down at his feet, at the scattered bones poking through the blackened ground. Orc, man, horse, it no longer mattered. The dead were brothers, now equal in the cold dust, and somewhere deep within him, a small part stirred, a fragment of thought unfamiliar and unwelcome, a soft pang that felt suspiciously like sadness. He shook his head to clear it, thick strands of greasy hair falling across his brow, but the feeling clung stubbornly, as if it had been waiting for this silence to awaken at last. Days had blurred together since the battle ended, each one marked only by the rising and setting of a pale, indifferent sun. Maugruk had no map, no plan, only the instinct to move forward, to seek something he could not name, something he saw sometimes when he closed his eyes at night. Not the roaring fires and slaughter he'd been bred to crave, but softer visions of green hills rolling under blue skies, of rivers laughing as they danced over stones, of stars scattered across a deep velvet sky. He would wake from these dreams, for dreams they surely were, with a growl, shaking himself free as a wolf shakes off rain. But the images would cling to him, stubborn and persistent, growing sharper with every restless sleep. Tonight, he thought as he picked his way over a shattered wagon. Tonight he would not dream. He would find shelter beneath some fallen archway or within the hollowed shell of a tower, and sleep a dreamless sleep. But even as the thought formed, he knew it was a lie. The dreams were stronger now, creeping into his waking mind, coloring the corners of his vision with hues of green and gold that had no place among the black and grey ruins. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, thin, lonely, and Maugruk tilted his head, listening, feeling for the first time a kinship not of the mind, but of the spirit, a fellow wanderer without a pack, howling into a world that had forgotten him. He moved on, boots stirring dust and broken glass, until at last he found a place to rest, a low arch of stone half buried in debris. Shadowed and silent, he settled there, leaning his broad back against the cold wall, drawing his tattered cloak around him as night seeped into the ruins. His eyes, once fierce and blood-bright, dulled to a weary orange glow, and as sleep claimed him, Maugruk slipped not into darkness, but into another dream, soft and shimmering, where he stood upon a hill beneath a sky so vast and blue it made his heart ache. And for the first time, he did not fight the dream. He let it carry him away, across fields he had never seen, toward a horizon he could never have imagined. And somewhere, far beyond the borders of broken Isengard, the first star of evening blinked to life, a single silver tear in the bruised sky, watching over the last child of the Red-Eye as he dreamed of a world reborn. Whispers in the dark. The night wrapped itself around the ruins like a living thing, thick and cool, and breathing in slow, steady sighs through the broken stones. Maugruk stirred in his shallow sleep, shifting against the cold ground as a voice brushed the edges of his dreaming, not the harsh bellow of commanders, nor the dreadful will of the eye, but something softer, gentler, a whisper like the rustling of leaves far away. He grunted low in his throat, eyelids fluttering open, to a world drowned in misty grey, where even the stars seemed hesitant to shine. The ruins were strange at night, the familiar jagged shapes of stone and iron blurring into ghostly forms, half seen and fleeting, as though the wreckage itself had grown restless. Yet it was not the shifting shadows that set Maugruk's heart pounding with a dull, unfamiliar ache. It was the whisper, faint but insistent, curling through the broken archways, weaving around the fallen statues, threading between the shattered battlements. He rose slowly, joints creaking, the heavy weight of exhaustion clinging to him like a second skin, but the pull of the whisper was stronger, drawing him forward on unsteady legs, each step crunching softly over gravel and bone. It was not a language he understood, if it was a language at all, more a feeling, a hum that resonated somewhere deep beneath his battered ribs, the voice of water flowing unseen, of wind sighing through high branches, of the earth murmuring secrets older than any tower of stone. For a long while he wandered without thought, moving through the maze of ruin like a ghost himself, until he found himself at the edge of a broken courtyard, its flagstones cracked and overgrown with creeping moss, and there, bathed in the pale light of a hesitant moon, stood a tree. Maugruk stared, blinking slowly as if disbelieving his own sight. It was a small thing, gnarled and bent, its bark blackened by smoke and flame, yet somehow impossibly it lived, a stubborn handful of green leaves trembling on its twisted branches, a defiant breath of life among the wreckage. He approached without realizing it, drawn by the same whisper that had stirred him from sleep, and as he neared, he could hear it more clearly. A sound not heard with the ears, but felt with the heart, a lullaby older than any battle song, a murmur of resilience and quiet strength. For a long time he simply stood there, massive and scarred, and breathing slow in the hush, staring at the little tree as if it were some strange relic from a world he had never been allowed to know. The dreams, he thought distantly, the dreams had led him here, and a part of him, a small part still hidden beneath layers of brutal training and bred in rage, wondered if perhaps they had not been dreams at all. Perhaps they had been memories, not his own, but the world's, seeping into the cracks left behind by war. He reached out a rough, scarred hand, fingers trembling slightly as they brushed against a leaf. It was soft, impossibly soft and warm with life, a stark contrast to the chill that clung to his skin. The leaf quivered beneath his touch, but did not fall, and Maugruk, without quite knowing why, let out a long, shuddering breath, as if he had been holding it for a lifetime. The whispering grew quieter then, settling into a deep, peaceful hum, and Maugruk, feeling an unfamiliar peace settle over his weary body, sank to the ground beside the tree. Resting his back against its stubborn trunk, he closed his eyes, not in exhaustion this time, but in surrender, allowing himself to drift once more into the current of unseen dreams, where fields stretched green and golden to the horizon and rivers laughed like children at play, and high above it all, the stars watched with a tender patience, waiting for him to remember, and in the soft dark of the ruins, beneath the whispering leaves of a single surviving tree, the last child of the Red-Eye slept without fear for the first time in all his blood-stained life. The broken blade. Dawn crept into the ruins on quiet feet, a faint blush of light that barely touched the blackened stones. Maugruk stirred beneath the stubborn little tree, his massive frame shifting in slow, groggy movements. For a long while, he remained curled. There, eyes closed, listening to the soft breathing of the world around him. It was a new sound, this breathing, something he had never noticed before. The rise and fall of the earth itself, like the slow pull of tides in a distant sea. When he finally opened his eyes, the world looked different, not brighter, for the sky was still pale and heavy with mist, but clearer somehow, less like a battlefield, and more like a place that had survived something terrible. He rose to his feet, joints popping, and slung the tattered remains of his cloak around his shoulders, casting one last glance at the little tree, as if to fix its image in his memory. Then he turned and began to walk, drawn again by the quiet, unspoken pull that had stirred his dreaming. His path led him across the broken courtyard, through archways that wept ivy and past statues eroded by time and neglect, until he came upon what had once been the heart of the stronghold, a great square strewn with the wreckage of battle, shattered shields, twisted spears, bones bleached by sun and rain. Something gleamed among the ruins, catching the feeble light. Like a distant star, Maugruk moved toward it slowly, wary of traps, even though he knew there were none left to spring. When he reached the source of the glint, he dropped to one knee and brushed aside the ashen dust, revealing the remains of a sword, its blade broken in two, the hilt wrapped in leather long since cracked and weathered, the pommel shaped like a sleeping hawk, even broken. It was beautiful, a thing crafted not merely for killing, but for honor, for pride. He lifted it carefully, cradling it in both hands. The blade felt strangely warm against his calloused palms, as if some fragment of its old spirit still lingered within the steel. Maugruk studied it in silence, feeling an ache rise in his chest, a longing he could not name. He thought of the dreams, the rivers, the fields, the stars, and he thought of the tree, clinging to life amid the ashes. The sword was broken, ruined by war, yet something within it endured, a memory of what it had once been, a promise that perhaps in time it could be something more. Without fully understanding why, Maugruk slung the broken sword across his back, securing it with a strip of torn cloth. He had no skill in forging, no art to mend it, but it felt right. To carry it, a token of a different path. A path not paved in blood and conquest, but in memory and hope. He stood there for a long while, the mist curling around his legs, the dead city silent as a tomb. And in that silence he made a choice, small and quiet and entirely his own. He would not wander aimlessly anymore. He would follow the dreams, chase the whispers, seek the fields. and stars he had seen in the secret places of his mind. Turning his face westward, Maugruk began to walk, each heavy step stirring the dust of the old world, carrying him towards something new, something unknown. The broken sword tapped lightly against his back with every stride, a steady heartbeat, a reminder that even the ruined could endure, that even the forgotten could dream anew and far above. Unseen by the weary traveler, the clouds parted for just a moment, allowing a sliver of pale sunlight to spill through, bathing the dead city in a ghostly glow. And for the briefest instant, the ruins did not seem broken at all, but merely waiting, breathing, dreaming alongside him. Across the empty lands, the world beyond the ruins was wide and empty, stretching out in broken hills and silent fields that whispered only to the wind. Maugruk moved through it like a shadow, his massive form blending into the drab colors of stone and faded grass. Each step steady, unhurried, the broken sword tapping lightly against his back with the rhythm of a second heartbeat. Days blurred together in soft grays and muted golds, the sun a pale disk drifting across the sky, the nights a vast ocean of stars that watched without judgment, without fear. There were no roads here, no markers left by men, only the slow, steady pulse of the land beneath his boots, guiding him westward by some instinct older than maps. Sometimes he would pass the remnants of old villages, blackened beams jutting from the earth like the ribs of dead beasts, crumbled walls clothed in ivy, doorways gaping open to the wind, and though he felt the pull of shelter, he never lingered long. The memories clung too thickly to those places, the echoes of fire and fear woven into the very stones. It was better to sleep beneath the open sky, to let the cool air and the scent of wild grasses fill his lungs. There was a strange kind of peace in the empty lands, a softness in the silence that Maugruk had never known in the clamor of war. He grew attuned to the small sounds, the distant cry of a hawk riding the thermals, the whisper of a brook hidden among the hills, the rustle of dry reeds bowing before the evening breeze. And at night, when he built his tiny, cautious fires and huddled close against the chill, he would sometimes catch himself staring up at the stars, tracing their cold silver paths with a wonder he could not name. The dreams continued too, growing clearer with every passing night. Sometimes he walked through vast meadows where flowers brushed against his legs, their colors so vivid it hurt to look at them. Sometimes he floated down wide, laughing rivers that carried him toward horizons stitched with the gold of sunset. And always, always there were the stars, ancient and endless, watching him with a quiet patience that filled his chest with a sweet, aching longing. Once, as he passed through a deep valley littered with boulders, Maugruk found a flock of wild goats grazing on the sparse grass. They lifted their heads to watch him pass, their eyes wide and wary, but they did not bolt, and he did not chase. There was no hunger in him for blood, no thrill of the hunt, only a strange satisfaction in moving among them without violence, without fear. Later, resting beneath a crumbling arch of stone, he wondered at himself, wondered what he was becoming, wondered if the dreams were changing him, or if they were merely revealing something that had always been buried deep within. The seasons shifted as he traveled, the air growing cooler, the grass crisper beneath his boots, the trees along the scattered streams donning cloaks of gold and red. Once, in the soft twilight of an autumn evening, he came upon a great herd of deer moving through a misty glen. their breath steaming in the chill air, their hooves making no sound upon the fallen leaves. Maugruk froze at the edge of the trees, heart pounding with a strange, tender awe, and for a long, trembling moment he was no Uruk-hai, no creature of war and darkness, but simply another being among the living things of the world. He watched them pass, their sleek forms fading into the mist like dreams, and when they were gone, he continued on his way. Lighter somehow, the broken sword tapping gently against his back like a whisper of encouragement. The land grew wilder as he moved westward, the hills rising into rugged shoulders, the forests deepening into shadowed labyrinths, and though the journey grew harder, Maugruk did not falter. Something called him onward, something stronger than weariness, stronger even than fear. He walked through rain and cold and the lonesome cries of the night, always westward, always toward the dreams, and in the quiet spaces between steps, between heartbeats, between breaths, he began to understand that he was not chasing a place, but a promise. A memory not of where he had been, but of what he might become. Beneath the wide, dreaming sky, Maugruk pressed onward, a broken sword at his back and a fragile, stubborn hope growing within him like the first green leaf of spring. The shepherd's gift. The hills rolled gentle and wide beneath a low grey sky, the grass bending and sighing beneath the kiss of the wind. Maugruk moved carefully through the open fields, the weight of the broken sword familiar now against his back, his cloak catching at his ankles as he crossed the land like a drifting shadow. Ahead, near a crooked fence half swallowed by tall grass, smoke coiled upward in a thin, wavering line, the scent of burning wood sharp and clean against the damp air. Maugruk hesitated, the old instincts rising, caution, concealment, but he pushed them down gently, like calming a restless beast, and pressed onward as he neared. He saw a small, crooked cottage leaning against the hill, its stone walls patched with mud, its roof sagging beneath a quilt of moss and thatch. An old man sat on a stool by the door, wrapped in a thick woolen cloak, his head bowed, a pipe clutched in weathered hands. A flock of sheep grazed nearby, their soft bleating the only sound apart from the wind. Maugruk slowed, every muscle tensed, for flight, for fear. But the old man did not react, did not lift his head or call out. He simply sat, breathing slow and steady. A small figure in a vast, empty world. Cautiously, Maugruk approached, boots whispering through the grass, and it was only when he stood a few paces away that he saw the clouded, sightless eyes staring blankly into the mist. The old man was blind, and yet there was no fear. In him, no trembling or hurried prayer, only a quiet patience that seemed to stretch backward and forward in time, as though he had long ago made peace with whatever came to his door. The old man's head tilted slightly, the faintest ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Thought I heard you," he rasped, voice like dry leaves tumbling over stone. "Come closer, and then don't stand there like a wraith." Maugruk's throat worked, but no sound came. He took a hesitant step forward, and then another, until he stood before the old man, towering and monstrous and utterly at a loss. The old man chuckled, a dry, wheezing sound. "You're a big one, aren't you? Thought maybe it was one of the boys from the village. But no, you've got a heavy tread, a tired tread. Someone who's walked too far with too little reason." Maugruk shifted uneasily, the words cutting closer to truth than any blade. The old man reached out, one gnarled hand groping the air, and after a moment's hesitation, Maugruk knelt, bowing his head low so that the hand brushed his tangled hair, rough fingers patting gently. "Lost, are you?" the old man murmured. "Well, The world's full of lost things, no shame in that. For a long while, they simply sat there, the blind man and the Uruk-hai, the wind sighing around them like the breath of old ghosts. At last the old man rose stiffly to his feet, setting aside his pipe. "Come inside, stranger," he said, voice kind and unafraid. "There's stew on the hearth, not much but enough." Maugruk hesitated, heart hammering against his ribs. He had been shunned, cursed, hunted his whole life, yet here, without even a glimpse of his terrible form, this frail human offered kindness as naturally as breathing wordless. He followed the old man into the cottage, ducking low beneath the doorframe. The room was small and dim, the hearth crackling softly with a meager fire, the air thick with the rich, earthy scent of stew. The blind man moved confidently through the space, ladling the stew into a cracked bowl and setting it on the rough table with a thunk. Maugruk stared at it, hands trembling slightly. When was the last time he had been offered food without demand? Without command, without cruelty, slowly, reverently, he sat and lifted the bowl. The stew was thin, mostly broth and a few stubborn vegetables, but to Maugruk it tasted like the finest feast ever laid upon a king's table. He ate slowly, savoring every bite, and when he finished, he set the bowl down with a deep rumbling sigh. The old man smiled again, though his eyes stared blankly past Maugruk's shoulder. "You're welcome to rest here tonight," he said simply. "World's no place for lonely souls wandering in the dark." That night, Maugruk slept on a bed of straw by the hearth, the fire's warmth seeping into his bones, the steady breathing of the old man, and the quiet snuffling of the sheep weaving a blanket of safety around him. His dreams were soft, filled with the scent of wood smoke and the creak of an old rocking chair, and somewhere in the distance, a river laughed as it tumbled over smooth stones, carrying him gently onward. And as he slept, the broken sword rested beside him, its worn leather grip catching the firelight, a silent witness to the first gift of kindness the child of the Red Eye had ever known. Night beneath the stars. The old man asked no questions. When Maugruk rose with the first light, only offered a rough hand on his shoulder, a nod that spoke of understanding, of farewells between wanderers who knew the road was never meant to end. Maugruk left the crooked cottage behind, the soft bleating of the sheep fading into the misty morning, and turned his steps once more toward the west, toward the dreams that still shimmered just beyond reach. The land grew wilder as he traveled, hills giving way to craggy slopes and lonely ridges where the wind sang sad songs through the stones. Yet there was a strange comfort in the solitude now, a companionship in the silence, as if the world itself walked beside him. Day bled into evening with a long sigh of gold across the sky, and Maugruk found himself atop a broad open hill, the grass rippling around him in soft waves. He settled there, drawing his tattered cloak tighter against the rising chill, and laid the broken sword across his knees like an old friend. Above him the first stars flickered to life, cautious and pale at first, then bolder as the sky deepened into a velvet ocean. Maugruk watched them with wide, wondering eyes, their cold fire untouched by the sorrows of the world below, endless and ancient. Beyond the reach of any hand, the dreams stirred within him as he gazed upward. Not visions this time, but feelings, deep and wordless, the sense of something vast and kind and terribly old, a reminder that the darkness he had been bred to serve was only a small passing shadow compared to the immensity of the light. He stretched out one rough, scarred hand toward the heavens, fingers splayed wide, and for a moment he imagined he could touch them, those cold fires. imagined he could pluck a star from the sky and carry it within him, a flame to light the long dark of his soul. The night deepened, the constellations wheeling slowly overhead, and Maugruk lay back upon the grass, the earth cradling his weight as gently as a mother might hold a sleeping child. He listened to the sounds of the living world around him, the chirrup of night, insects, the soft flutter of owl wings in the dark, the distant murmur of a brook winding through a hollow, and felt, for the first time, truly a part of it, not an invader, not a weapon, but a creature of the earth, breathing and dreaming and belonging. The stars above seemed to sing as he drifted towards sleep, a song with no words, no melody, only a feeling. A promise whispered across the vastness of space and time. You are not lost, the stars seemed to say. You are only beginning. And as Maugruk closed his eyes beneath the wheeling sky, the dreams rose up to meet him once more. Fields of green, rivers of silver, forests deep and humming with secret life. And he knew without doubt or fear that he was moving closer with every step, every breath, every heartbeat, the child of the red eye no longer, but something new, something yet unnamed, carried forward by the silent music of the stars. The river and the dream. Morning found Maugruk wrapped in mist, the grass slick with dew, the sky a pale, yawning canvas waiting for color. He rose slowly, joints stiff but spirit light, and continued westward, drawn by a pull he could no longer question. The land dipped into shallow valleys where willows trailed their fingers through the mist, and the air smelled sweet and sharp, like damp earth after a long rain. Somewhere ahead, he heard it, the low murmur of water slipping over stones, laughing quietly to itself in the hush of morning. His steps quickened, though he did not know why, the sound tugging at him with invisible threads, leading him through a stand of silver-trunked trees where the mist clung in tatters to the branches. And then suddenly there it was, a river, broad and slow and shining like molten glass, its surface dappled with drifting leaves. The water spoke in 1,000 tiny voices, each ripple and eddy weaving together into a single, endless song. Maugruk stood at the river's edge, heart hammering softly against his ribs, for the song was not only water, not only wind, it was the song of the dreams, the same gentle whisper that had haunted his sleep and stirred his soul to waking. He dropped to one knee, cupping his rough hands into the water. It was cold and clear and tasted of stone and sky, and as he drank, a deep warmth bloomed within him, a warmth not of fire but of life, a pulse that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the earth itself. He gazed into the water and saw not his reflection, not the scarred, grim figure he had always known, but something softer, shadowed and uncertain, yes, but alive. A soul still forging itself anew. He sat then, knees drawn up, arms wrapped loosely around them, and listened to the river's song, its endless flowing speaking of time beyond reckoning, of mountains rising and falling, of forests spreading green fingers across empty plains, of stars birthing and dying in the silence of the void. He felt himself grow small, and yet not diminished, small like a single leaf in a great forest, a note in a vast symphony, a piece of something too grand to fully understand. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes, time folding in upon itself like the mist curling along the riverbanks, and Maugruk dreamed without sleeping, visions unfurling behind his closed eyes. He saw fields where children ran laughing through tall grasses, their hands full of wildflowers. He saw cities of white stone glittering beneath high, golden banners. He saw forests untouched by war, where ancient trees sang low songs to the stars above, and everywhere, in every vision, he felt a presence, vast and gentle, watching, waiting. He opened his eyes with a shuddering breath, the dreams clinging to him like mist, and knew deep in the marrow of his bones that he could never turn back. That whatever he had been, soldier, monster, servant of darkness, was only a small broken shard of what he might yet become. He rose, the broken sword heavy but sure upon his back, and for a long moment simply stood, letting the river's song weave itself into his very blood. Then, with a final glance at the silver water slipping onward to distant shores, he turned once more to the west, stepping lightly now, as though the earth itself welcomed him. The dreams no longer a distant call, but a steady flame burning in his chest, guiding him forward into a future he could not see, but no longer feared. And as he walked, the mist thinned, and the sky deepened into a rich, endless blue. And somewhere, far ahead, where the land kissed the edge of the world, the sea waited with open arms. Beyond the red eye, the land fell away in slow, rolling sighs, the hills softening into wide, open meadows stitched with the pale threads of wandering streams. Maugruk moved through it like a wraith of another age, the broken sword slung across his back. The dreams, burning steady and quiet within him. The air grew thicker with the scent of salt and wild grasses, and the distant cry of gulls floated down from an unseen sky. He knew, without understanding how, that he was drawing near to the end of his journey, an end he had never dared to imagine when first he stumbled from the ashes of Isengard. The earth sloped downward, and as he crested the last low rise, the world opened before him like a great silver mirror, endless and shimmering. The sea stretched to the horizon, vast and breathing beneath the pale arch of the sky. Its waves kissed the shore with soft, endless sighs, and the light upon the water danced like 1,000 stars, fallen to earth. Maugruk stood there, rooted as if struck by some ancient spell, his wide, scarred hands hanging limp at his sides, his breath catching in his throat. This, then, was the place he had seen in dreams, not the fields, not the rivers, not the forests, though all of those had been waymarkers along the road. But here, where the land dissolved into sky and water, where the known world ended and something vaster began, he stepped forward slowly, boots sinking into the cool, wet sand. The hiss of the retreating tide curling around his ankles like a whispered greeting. The salt stung his skin, the breeze tugged at his cloak, and above him the stars began to pierce the deepening blue one by one. He sank to his knees at the water's edge, the broken sword slipping from his shoulders to rest beside him in the sand. His reflection wavered in the wet mirror before him. Not the brutal thing he once had been, but something gentler, something wounded, yes, but healing. A soul patched. Together from dreams and kindness and stubborn hope, he closed his eyes, letting the sounds of the sea fill him, the rush of waves, the low, endless breathing of the deep, the song without words that seemed to weave him into the fabric of the world itself. For a long time he simply knelt there, unmoving, feeling the tide ebb and flow around him, carrying away the last shreds of the red eye, the last whispering chains of anger and fear, until he was only Maugruk. No master's creature, no mindless weapon, but himself, whole and small, and free beneath the endless sky. And when at last he rose, he left the broken sword lying there in the sand, a relic of a life left behind. The tide would claim it soon enough, washing it clean, carrying it into the deep places where memory and myth mingled together. He turned his back to the water, the starlight soft upon his broad shoulders. and walked inland with slow, steady steps, the dreams no longer pulling at him but walking beside him, not a destination to be reached, but a companion for the road ahead behind him. The sea sang its endless song, a lullaby for the world and all its weary travelers, and the last child of the red eye disappeared into the night, not with the roar of battle, but with the quiet, steady breath of a soul reborn. Thank you, traveler, for joining us on this gentle journey across Middle-earth tonight. If this story carried you softly into rest, don't forget to subscribe, like, and explore our playlist for many more whispered tales under the stars. Until we meet again, may your dreams be full of stars, rivers, and open skies. Good night.